What's really interesting about self-esteem, do you know we are the only creatures on the planet that have self-esteem? It's quite ironic. The Dalai Lama was asked once. He said, "So tell me, how do you deal with self-esteem issues?" And the Dalai Lama said, "What do you mean self-esteem?" He says, "Like how you view yourself, the impression of yourself." He said, "Well, I don't have a view of myself. I'm just myself." And he found it so strange because then he said, "Well, think about it. Does a cat think about how they look or how they are perceived? No. Does a tree feel that way? A tree is just a tree. It doesn't say, oh, I have a branch out of place. I can't go out tonight, or, I can't be, or a cat says, oh God, because some cats look quite shocking according to us, right? But they don't have, they don't have self-esteem issues. They're just like, but we have two selves, which is really interesting to know. Before you get carried away thinking that you've got self-esteem issues, you've got to ask yourself, where is the self that's got the esteem issue? Because I am a human being and I am me. Now, you say, I can't stand myself. Who's I and who's self? So it's very interesting to note that, first of all, get some perspective about your self-esteem and don't give it too much credence, because that's part of the problem, is that we make our lives about, we need to improve our self-esteem. But you just need to be yourself. And children don't have self-esteem. They can wear the funniest clothes and they'll still look cute. But we as adults, we think, I can't wear that in the street and what will people think? And that whole thing stops us from becoming our true selves. So on that particular light, a high self-esteem or a well-established self-esteem means that you're confident in your abilities, that you know yourself really well, and that you're comfortable engaging in the world. As opposed to that, where you have a low self-esteem, where you're really concerned about what people think about you and you judge yourself. Remember, judgment starts with yourself before it starts with others. And then on the other hand, you have an inflated self-esteem, which is that I know how good I am, and that can be dangerous. So it's not really high self-esteem. It's inflated, and it can allow you to overcompensate and think that you have the situation when you don't. So we need to get a balance between all three. Well, in the workplace, when you are confident in yourself and you have a good opinion about yourself, then you would perform better. It means you'd be more productive. It'll also, as a leader, they can consider good self-esteem amongst their staff would be very important for them to be able to engage more effectively with each other, where you don't have someone saying, well, I don't know if I can express my opinion because this other person may come across as overbearing, overpowerful. So that it has all those impacts on our well-being and ultimately affects the bottom line of the company. So having your staff having a high self-esteem or a good opinion about themselves is really important. There's been a lot of this misconstrued idea that self-esteem means arrogance, and it doesn't. It just means that you're sure about yourself and that you're certain about your abilities with all humility, and appearing as if though you don't have any confidence. Somehow it has been misconstrued that is the right way to go. So if someone asks you how you're doing and you say, yeah, I'm okay. That's not really humility to me. I mean, the person is genuinely asking you, and there's nothing wrong with you saying, I'm very well, thank you, alhamdulillah. And there's no bad self-esteem. And so in the workplace, of course, it has knock-on effects on how we interact with each other. And then when you're trying to produce a document or anything else, that's going to come across very badly if the self-esteem of the colleagues is not there. And that requires encouragement from the team as well. Well, that's very important. So when you're talking about customers, we're trying to convey in them that they should be confident about your abilities. So in that particular way, how do you make someone feel confident? As much as it applies to customers, it also applies to team members, and it applies to staff members as well, is that you have to communicate in a certain way that makes them feel confident in your abilities. Now, how do we do that? Well, firstly, it's about speaking well, speaking calmly, confidently, presenting yourself in a respectable way. So when it comes to customer complaints and customer queries, when a customer calls up, that you take ownership, where you say, I know what you're saying, because you're not in any way doubting your ability and at the same time your company's ability. So you're saying, I'm here as a representative of the company and I've got your back. So don't worry, you're safe with me. And the way that you do this is that you take responsibility. You make sure you follow up with the customers. You make sure that you convey to the customer that you've understood their requirements and that you're on the same page as them. So it's like the conversation that we had last week, if listeners would tune into that, about building rapport. So rapport is really important. And then make sure you ask them for feedback and give them feedback often as well, and say, well, I just like to keep you posted. And you and I both know, if you call up a company and they give you this extra warmth and extra support, that's going to leave a permanent impression in your mind. And these are small little things that you can do. I remember a Dubai a taxi driver. He was featured on YouTube and things like that, because he used to have a newspaper ready. He used to have all these assortments of drinks, and he had a little fridge in his car. And it was just his way of saying, look, I'm going to be driving a cab all day. I might as well just do something extra. And of course, just by that kindness and that and then instilling confidence in the passengers, he became one of the most well-known cabbies. Although he was taking people to the same destination, charging the same fees, people said, no, we prefer him because that's your edge in business. So that's really important as well. And we know the saying that your net worth is your network. So by you showing someone that, listen, I put my trust in this person, what you're saying indirectly is that you can trust me. And because you can trust me, I'm giving you a credibility. But the reason why we may not do that is because we're not sure about our own abilities and our own judgment abilities. So that comes across that way. And I find that in Cape Town, it definitely happens less. In Johannesburg, they do this a lot more, and I found that a little strange. So when I would go to Johannesburg and I'd say, listen, do you know someone who's a printer? In fact, you can use the example of a cab driver. I want to go on holiday, as I did to Magaliesburg a little while ago, and they said, well, Uber's going to cost you too much, but my cousin has got someone, and that person, they've taken us before. And in fact, you're selling on their behalf, and that's the best referral you can ever give. So, and that requires trust as well, which is another interesting point on the thing, is that, do I trust the person, and can I convey enough trust to my customer to say, listen, use my cousin or use my friend and all the rest of it, and putting your name on the line, and like I mentioned in the previous things about having difficult conversations, saying, listen, I put my faith behind this person. And of course, you can qualify it if you really want to and say, well, if he messes you up, then it's not my responsibility. But that kind of thing, finding a contractor in Cape Town to do building works, I mean, that's your typical thing. I've asked everyone, look, can I do some renovations? And listen, could you give me the name of the person that you use? And he said, I'll never, ever use that person again. So don't ask me for that detail. And that's a common theme. So I just put all my renovations on hold. So if any listeners out there, and look, man, if you say you know some people, great, but that it scares me. So I said to my wife, listen, let's just put it on hold, because we don't want that kind of situation. And that's part of the strength of a community, isn't it? Is that we're there to confirm each other and raise each other. And if we're not doing that, then we're not growing ourselves, and we're not helping other people grow either. So great point there. There's this wonderful saying that says that if you want something done, ask a busy person. And because if he can do it, he'll do it well. And if he can't, he'll know someone that can. Because a busy person generally the reason he's busy is because he's delivering on something, right? He's not busy surfing at Muizenberg, which is one wonderful way to spend your morning, of course, no judgment to that. But it's like, okay, because he's busy and he's connected, but he'll know someone who can. And you get the other guy on the Muizenberg beach and he's like, no, well, my buddy's also a surfer, and, he does some repairs. And I'm like, okay, no, let me not engage on that particular point. So that's really important as well. Well, I have a situation right now where a very well-to-do businessman contacted me and said, look, I'm a really good businessman. I'm doing really well. But right now, I don't know if I can do this anymore. So confidence sometimes doesn't come from your inability to do things. It's that at that particular moment, you start doubting yourself. And we know now, with all the insecurity going on, you may know how to do your job, but with COVID going on and all the other uncertainties happening, you're starting to doubt yourself. And doubt is a door that once it's open, then you allow this negative self-talk to enter. And before you know it, you're destroying yourself by your own chatter. So it's very important to figure it out and stop yourself and say, okay, hold on a second. Let me get a pen and paper down and let me write down what is it that I'm feeling? Because the mind has this ability to take this chatter, and before you know it, you lead from one thought to the other, and then you're questioning everything about yourself. And one of the side effects, and you may notice this, the listeners would notice this, is you get angry and frustrated. So a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm so angry and frustrated." But in fact, what you're saying is that you're afraid that you can't deliver. And that's what I revealed to this businessman. And he said, "Well, I never saw it like that, so thanks for telling me." So what we have to do in that particular time is to start building up confidence with ourselves by doing small things to prove only to ourselves that we are capable of delivery. Which means, for instance, that if you're trying to say, "Okay, well, let's see if I can walk all the way to Egypt from Cape Town," you then undertake an exercise where you say, "Let me see if I can walk from here to, say, Paarl," right? Which may be a reasonable request if you're relatively fit. You do that, and then you say to yourself, "Look, you've done this. How excellent you are." And what you do is you amplify the win. Amplify the win. It's almost like a child that's trying to learn to ride the bicycle. If they fall off the bicycle the first time and you go, "Listen, child, forget about it. You're not going to be good at riding a bicycle." What's going to happen to the child? It's not going to have that confidence. The same way, we have that same type of situation. So if you tell the child, "Listen, you did really well. Look, you fell off the bike, but these things take time. Look, get back on." And when they do that second and third pedal, you're behind them saying, "Well done, come on, you can do it. Look how well you've done." And funny enough, our selves, if you want to call it that, are like children. We need that encouragement. And somehow we get all grown up and we're like, no, we don't need that anymore. You do. You need to encourage yourself by feeling good about yourself and accepting yourself. More importantly, accepting the things that you don't like about yourself. Things that you like about yourself is easy to accept. But if there's something you don't like about yourself and you say, "Well, I'm not a great speaker," accept that. But at the same time, you've got to know how many other people are not great speakers. Everybody else can work their way up to that particular level of confidence, but it requires baby steps, and you've got to give yourself that time and space and nurture your own confidence. So when I'm coaching people, I always say, "Tell me about how your father and your mom interacted, and also how did they nurture you and raise you?" And it's funny because we just spoke about the child example and encouraging them. And a lot of the times right now, parents are so caught up in their lives and the things that they've got to do. And then they come home at night and they just need Netflix to unwind. And they don't really have the time to stay with their children. But that precious time with their children, especially during those formative years between the ages of 0 and 7, if you're with them, and you're saying, "Yes, that's great. Let's build a puzzle together. Let's do this. Let's do that." And I know it's difficult. We're not being unrealistic here, but just a little bit of that push, then it inculcates a particular value. And of course, if you yourself as a parent are a living example, then your children see that and they say it comes naturally. And so, speaking of this businessman, his son is naturally a very good speaker. But that's not because he naturally got it. It's because you observe someone else in that particular way. So in sales particularly, remember, first impressions are vital. And the same thing applies to people that are doing websites and Instagram and all the rest of it where they're marketing their companies, is that you have 7 seconds to retain the customer or keep their attention. And in fact, that's dwindling down all the time. I mean, the amount of stuff we've been bombarded with all the time is making it even more difficult. So you have to make that first impression. So if you think about it, a lot of people say, "Well, I'm not going to dress well and people must just accept me for the way I am." Unfortunately, people are biased. And if people were not biased, then you wouldn't see people spending money 20,000 Rand on a suit when they're closing a big real estate deal. You wouldn't see them driving a flashy car in order to impress people, because some people say, "Well, that's so, it's so low and it's so cheap." But guess what? They're closing the deals, right? Because so your appearance is really important, and it doesn't mean you have to wear the Armani suit. But if you're a laborer, then look a particular way to instill confidence in that person that you can deliver. And when it comes time to the professional environment, these days, suit and tie may not necessarily be the way, but then there's smart casual and all the rest of it. So appearance is very important. The other thing about selling well is about knowing exactly what you want and what you're offering to them, and this applies to relationships and communication and persuasion as well, is your outcome. What I want to do is to sell this particular product. There's no messing around. You're not coming in sort of, saying, hi, I'm here to offer you some nice things to talk about, but you have an intention to sell, and nobody likes that. So people like to be straightforward. Look, I'm trying to sell this particular thing, rather than saying the words try. Say, I am selling this, and what I'd like to do is close the sale. And now you say from your side what it is that you require, and let's see if they match. So it's not this hard sell where you need to. I don't believe in manipulation and in other words, saying what the customer wants to hear. It's always going to bite you later on. And so I always say, speak the truth and speak on point without sabotaging as well, because a lot of people say, well, like I was training one of the staff members at one of the companies, and they said, well, I had to tell them that my boss, another customer returned the product, so my boss was very upset with me. I said, did you have to tell them that right then and there? Were there not so many other times where people didn't return the product? Yes, but not yes, but I mean, you didn't need to do that. Right, so you don't have to sabotage as well. So being honest doesn't mean that you have to state everything in order to dissuade them from buying your product as well. So that needs to be made clear as well. And then ask questions, many questions, because that's how you get a true understanding of what that person wants. And also you're listening at the same time of their communication style, and then you can be able to convince them in their language, from their point of view, rather than from your limited perspective. Like, I want to close the deal. No, but what do they want? And does your product meet their requirements? If you're feeling taken for granted, then I think what the number one thing that I teach people is to have compassion. Because when you think that you're being taken for granted, your normal reaction is anger. And anger makes you behave in a way that is not useful at all to anybody. So what the first thing you do is say, have compassion. This person, you get those people that call you up selling cell phone contracts and everything else. And so what you have to do is stop yourself, look at it from their perspective, and don't sort of become the victim. Because once you're the victim, then you're yelling at them and, you're doing all sorts of things, and it doesn't really help in any way. First of all, for your own well-being, and secondly, you're not going to feel very nice about being nasty. So what you have to do is you have to be polite, and then you have to be assertive, but in a way that you keep the door open but keep the door closed. So what I mean by that is you're saying, for instance, look, I don't want any of these products in the near future, but if there's ever a time, I will get back to you. So what you're doing is you're saying in one way, don't call me next week, but at the same time, I'm not being rude, because maybe one day you will have a customer. And that's keeping both sides open. And also, when you're trying to make sure you're brushing someone off in a polite way, don't give too many open-ended reasons. Well, I don't know if I'm sure right now, and that's a no-no, because now you're opening the door, and then the person would say, well, what is it that's in your mind? So then you be assertive, you be short, you be sweet, and you don't leave the door ajar and say, well, this is what I would like to do or not like to do. But the other thing that you can do is also maybe give them an alternative. Maybe there's someone you don't like, and say, look, you can call them, for instance, as a terrible alternative. Or you could say, maybe get another job as an alternative, or something polite so that you're returning with that. But I think apart from anything is that have compassion, and then be very straight, very calm, and try not to feel like the victim, even though you feel that you have to be. Because I tell you what, in any situation, there's always two sides of the story, and everybody's just trying to earn a living and just feed a family. So that, have to have compassion in that particular way. Have compassion for that particular person. Now, that person may not be providing value that you need, because you're paying their salary as well. And so I had one of my clients whose boss is trying to get rid of them. And he said to them, you're very expensive to have here. And that's not something you say. It's a very low kick, saying, you don't do things like that. You've got to really consider that there's other person on the other side. So instead of that's what the boss is doing, making it about him, that, I'm paying your salary and you're costing me too much. And that's going to leave a very bitter taste. So in other words, what you have to do is say, Number one, can you help this person? And a lot of the times when someone's lost a loved one or the rest of it, if you can afford to, then give them some time off. Otherwise, you have to really be compassionate and say, I know what you're going through, and then explain to them clearly the situation that your company's facing rather than you. And the more you make it impersonal, like it's not a personal attack to them, the more they would understand in that particular way. But sometimes, no matter what you say, that person will be like, and play the victim. Like, I was always there for you, and now I'm going through a tough time, and you won't let me take this, and you don't take me that. And that's where you have to be assertive, and you have to be fair. But remember, it's not to tell him or her where their place is, but it's about saying, we have a company to run, we have an outcome to focus on, and that's why we need to cut this short. And saying no is one of the most powerful ways of retaining friendships, not destroying friendships. Because a lot of the times we say, I don't know how it, and that person says, look, why didn't you just tell me straight out that you didn't want me to be there, or you didn't want me in a relationship as well? And there's nothing wrong with saying, look, right now, this is my decision, no. And that's perfectly fine. Now, they can judge you as they like, and that's up to them. But by keeping that door open and saying, look, I'm not sure right now, first of all, you're doubting yourself, and nobody likes someone who's not sure about themselves. So that's the confidence thing that comes back to as well. Be assertive, be clear, be compassionate, be empathetic, and take the sting out of what you're doing, because a lot of the times we think that we're doing a great service to ourselves by getting one up. A lot of us are like, well, now that I have this position, I can take advantage of it. And you know what? It may give you a slightly boosted ego in the short term, but in the long term, it's really going to come back to you. And it's not a nice way to engage in the world. So always have the feelings for other people as well when you're doing things that you don't like to do.